So in this video, we're going to look at pattern recognition, and the ability to see patterns is what makes the innate immune system innate. We are born with our cells having the ability to see patterns. Our adaptive immune systems don't see patterns. So they don't do this. That's what's the fundamental difference between them and the innate system. The innate system can see patterns. So let's look at what that means. Patterns. So what I'm talking about again is pathogen-associated molecular patterns. So these are what phagocytes look for when they're deciding what to eat. What do they do through phagocytosis? How do they know, oh, that's a bacterium, I'd better eat that? Or that's a fungus, I'd better eat that? They have receptors that can identify certain pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs. So an example of that is lipopolysaccharide. You'd only ever see that on a bacterium. And so macrophages have a receptor that only binds to lipopolysaccharide. Same thing with peptidoglycan. Some of our cells have receptors that only detect peptidoglycan. And if they see peptidoglycan, the cell knows, oh, I'm touching a bacterium right now. I need to respond to that. And anything else we can identify that would be part of bacteria or fungus but not our own cells could be a pathogen-associated molecular pattern. There are also some of these associated with viruses. One of the biggest ones is double-stranded RNA. A virus with an RNA genome has to go through a stage in the cell where it has double-stranded RNA. And so if our cells detect this inside them, they know they're infected with a virus. So these are all just predictable patterns. These are predictable things that you see with invaders, but not with our own healthy cells, right? And so the receptors that detect these things are pattern recognition receptors in general, or PRRs. So I will use PRR as the abbreviation. And so these are the receptors that let phagocytes know what to eat. And they're encoded in our DNA. We can identify them when we sequence our DNA, and we know what they are. And yours are the same as mine. And macrophages are the same as the dendritic cells. They don't change over time. You have them the day you're born, and they're the same for the rest of your life. So they are fully innate, fully encoded in your DNA, the same way they are encoded in mine. So let's look at some examples of these. The toll-like receptors are an important group of pattern recognition receptors. So they're important, and they're found on any cell that's going to do phagocytosis and have to identify pathogens. Lots of organisms have that. So plants, insects, they were discovered in fruit flies, basically. And what you will see is that toll-like receptors tend to specifically detect one type of PAMP, like a certain specific type of peptidoglycan. So let's look at a list of PAMPs and the toll-like receptors that detect them. So these are the PAMPs, and these are the toll-like receptors. This is not something you have to memorize. I don't care if you remember which toll-like receptor goes to which PAMP. What I care about is that you look at this pattern I'm going to show you. So what we see is some PAMPs over here, and these are just different things that you'd only see in pathogens or only in microorganisms that have invaded our body. And a lot of these are molecules you will recognize from this class. But the other thing in this table is, I should say the toll-like receptors are numbered. Toll-like receptor 1 is an example. Toll-like receptor 6 is a different one. We will talk a lot about TLR3, or toll-like receptor 3, or TLR4. Look at the locations here. Some of them are on the plasma membrane, and some of them are on the phagosome membrane. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at a diagram. this is an ugly diagram of a macrophage or something with a phagosome in it. So it has eaten something, which is now in this phagosome. And the toll-like receptors are just drawn as these black shapes. So TLR4 senses lipopolysaccharide, and so it's facing out of the cell. So it's going to detect lipopolysaccharide outside this cell. But TLR3 is looking at double-stranded RNA. So it's only going to see things that are inside the phagosome. And TLR9, if we go back up here, sees bacterial and viral DNA. I'm not exactly sure how it does that, but it sees their DNA. So it's facing into the phagosome. Well, let's think about why. What happens in the phagosome? If you go back to the last video, what you see is that the phagosome is where this cell actively breaks open anything it has eaten. It breaks down any cell it ate. So it digests the outside of the cell, and that would free the DNA. So the DNA that was safely hidden inside that cell is now out where it can interact with these receptors. Or the inside of a virion has been broken open and the genome can now be detected by TLR3. So that's the general idea. Some of the toll-like receptors are going to be looking outward, generally at things you'd see on the outside of a fully intact pathogen, like lipopolysaccharide. That's the outermost layer of a gram-negative bacterium. And so yeah, that's going to be on the outside, and this cell could bump into lipopolysaccharide. But this cell will never bump into bacterial DNA because the DNA is inside bacterial cells. So the only time this cell can detect bacterial DNA is if it has eaten a bacterium and broken it open. And so in that case, the DNA would be inside the phagosome. So that's a big way cells know what to eat, is toll-like receptors and other pattern recognition receptors. And again, this is fundamentally innate. This is as innate as something can be. If you have it on the day you're born and it doesn't change throughout your entire life, that's pretty innate. And the other way phagocytes know what to eat is opsonization. So phagocytes have receptors for opsonins. So what is an opsonin? Well, it's a molecule that enhances phagocytosis. So that's kind of a circular thing. But we'll show you some examples of these. One kind of opsonin is an antibody. So if antibodies coat the outside of a virion, a macrophage is likely to eat it because it will recognize that. Also, the complement system will opsonize pathogens, and so antibodies are part of the adaptive immune system. The complement system really is an innate system, but they can both opsonize pathogens, and that allows our macrophages to know to eat them. So, a big idea here is self versus not self, and how the innate immune system can tell the difference. The immune system has to avoid attacking us. It has to attack invaders, but not us, and that's not a trivial thing. So it has to tell the difference between us, or self, and everything else, which is not self. And so, on the innate immune system side, cells can look for PAMPs. They can look for pathogen-associated molecular patterns, and then they know, oh, that is not self. The host obviously doesn't have PAMPs. We are not pathogens. We don't have any pathogen-associated molecular patterns. We are not bacteria. We are not fungus. We are not virus. So the cellular parts of our innate immune system can directly see, oh, that's bacteria, or that's a virus, or that's a fungus. And that is seeing, not self. Additionally, our cells have markers on the outside. And by marker, I mean a molecule that identifies it as something. So our cells have surface molecules that identify them as neurons or keratinocytes or whatever kind of cell. And macrophages have receptors for those too. So a macrophage can see, oh, this is one of our own cells. Don't mess with this cell. So the cellular parts of the innate immune system have hard-coded, built-in ways to identify invaders and to recognize ourselves. So what about the chemical and physical parts of the innate immune system? Well, the physical parts don't know what they're doing. They're just there. And the chemical parts generally are not toxic to us. So the only real challenge the innate immune system faces is identifying invaders, and for that it uses pattern recognition receptors. So that's enough innate immunity. In the next video we will start adaptive immunity, and I want you to do whatever it takes to clear out your brain, because adaptive immunity is not intuitive and it's going to turn your brain inside out to think about it. So get ready for that, and I'll see you at the next video.